Hello. Hello.
Yes, ma'am. Hello. Good evening, ma'am.
Good evening. Good evening, all of you. Hello, Prashant. Hello, Vinay. Pragati. Hello, Smriti. Manya.
Good
Shreya.
evening, ma'am.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Good evening. Hope I am visible and audible both. Or
Yes, ma'am.
okay. Nice to see you all once again on this virtual platform. So today we have the text, What is Cultural Studies by Ben Egger. And this is the final day for me to give a closer to my lecture. So I will try to share a few things, the key concepts of the essay written by Ben Egger. And actually it will be a different kind of lecture. You already you must have gone through the topic, what is cultural studies, isn't it? So a researcher, a future researcher, a researcher scholar is supposed to be gifted with that kind of critical sensibility and awareness that he or she can perceive things, can better judge whatever uh, uh, whatever text is before you, isn't it? But the point is, when a teacher is sitting in front of you, the teacher will open a new, the teacher will try to open new gateways, new areas the teacher will try to open before you. Okay, so with this objective, I'm going to start. Yes, hello Shivani. Yes. Huh. So,
hello ma'am. Good evening.
Evening. Okay. So I'm going to start the text. Sometimes I will be reading out the text and a little bit about the explanation part, that also is to be done, discussion also to be done. You may note down your questions, maybe in some informal session or the offline classes. Very soon we will have that kind of meeting also. So be with the text, be with me. Okay. I'm going to start the text. What is cultural studies? American and British university campuses are alive with new forms of interdisciplinary research. And this lecture is it resembles the yesterday lecture when I try to present before you an outline of the topic cultural studies. And here we are dealing with Ben Egger, a particular cultural theorist. We have taken Ben Egger's, which is prescribed for you. So we will try to make a correlation with the yesterday lecture, the basic outlines I have discussed, I have shown in my PPT. With that view, let's start the essay. American and British university campuses are alive with new forms of interdisciplinary research. You all know that it is interdisciplinary research. We can see fusion. We can see that many other disciplines like history, geography, social theory, cultural anthropology, and so on and so forth. There is a crisscrossing of many other theories, many other subjects in cultural studies. So that way we can call it interdisciplinary research. Although these activities are diverse and have multiple foci, they can broadly be grouped under the general heading of cultural studies. Now the word, some keywords I will be discussing before you. Out of any paragraph, my objective will be to discuss or present before you the key concepts, the most important arguments, the most important thesis given by the writer. So the keyword, try to understand what are the keywords used in any paragraph. So here we have the keyword diverse. This field is very diverse, as already yesterday I discussed this point. It is diverse and have multiple foci. It has many variants, isn't it? They can broadly be grouped under the general heading of cultural studies. Am I audible enough? Hello?
Yes ma'am. Yes ma'am,
Okay.
you're audible.
Okay. So it has multiple foci. It has multiple variants. So this term cultural studies, it is not monolithic concept. It is heterogeneous in nature and multiple. That's why we are saying that it has many variants. Okay. They can broadly be grouped under the general heading of cultural studies. As yesterday also I said that it is an umbrella term. A recent Chronicle of Higher Education article trumpets this increasingly high-profile interdisciplinary project, depicting it as an important trend in scholarship that will probably leave its mark for many years to come. A later article in the Chronicle, and you all know that only first chapter is our concern here. So many times Benegar will be discussing that this is my concern in chapter 3 to 7, 4 to 5, okay, but we have to select the important portions out of the text. So Benegar says that trumpets this increasingly high profile. Now mark this word high profile. High profile interdisciplinary project depicting is an important trend in scholarship that will probably leave its mark for many years to come. That means it's an upcoming branch, and it will fascinate readers in all times to come. A later article in the Chronicle reports heated controversies aired at a major cultural studies conference. Whether I said yesterday also that many conference and webinars are taking place, they are being organized. So it is a very upcoming field. Whether carried out in English department or sociology departments, cultural studies, challenges, traditional assumptions, mark this full sentence. It is very important idea we are getting. Whether carried out in English departments, whether people are discussing in English departments, this subject has been taken, or sociology departments, cultural studies, challenges, traditional assumptions of disciplinary scholars who plow the fields of cultural research in relative isolation from one another. So we have already talked that it cannot be dealt in isolation. This field is having multiple variants, and all the time many subjects will be intermingling with this subject, and it also challenges traditional assumptions of disciplinary scholars. Disciplinary scholars are those, those who are having very fixed notion, fixed ideology. They don't want to deviate, they don't want to digress, they don't have flexibility. Okay, traditional assumptions of disciplinary scholars who plow the fields of cultural research in relative isolation from one another. This book is about cultural studies. Of course, we are not reading the whole book, but whatever is given, both describing its multiple valences and arguing for a version of it that fits a certain intellectual and political agenda. I devote the first two chapters to a discussion of the multiple forms of cultural studies as well as of the historical and sociological reasons for the ascendance of cultural studies. In the next 5 chapters, I examine various theoretical approaches to cultural studies, including Marxist theories of culture, the Frankfurt School, mark these words, concepts, the Birmingham School, post-structuralism and postmodernism and feminism. My 3 concluding, actually he's giving an outline how he will be dealing in the book. Further, my 3 concluding chapters address the bifurcation between an essentially apolitical cultural studies and a cultural studies that is more directly engaged in the political contest over meaning and interpretive perspective. In arguing for the later version of cultural studies, I integrate a variety of the aforementioned theoretical approaches that together comprise an interdisciplinary approach to culture. Last word is very important, interdisciplinary approach to culture. So various other disciplines, various other ideologies, he has given the names, it seems to be intermingling with cultural studies. Throughout this book, I resist the tendencies for cultural studies to become another thoughtless slogan, even a whole new academic discipline. It resists to become, this school of thought resists to become a fixed discipline or a new discipline. Here you are reminded of the point which I used in my yesterday lecture, that the concept of culture is not new. Although the institutionalization means If we talk it in terms of academics only, institutionalization of critical insights and practices can often protect them. It also has the potential for diffusing them. Although I consider myself to be a student of cultural studies, and my work, he considers himself as a student, because a teacher, a professor, whosoever always treats himself as a student, and this is how humbly he is accepting. And my work in its various formulations contributes to a broad gauge and politically relevant version of cultural studies. I'm frustrated by the mounting tendency to turn cultural studies into a vacuous methodology for reading cultural text that has no real political grounding. This is very much the fate of the post-structuralism methodologized into deconstruction in American literary departments. Indeed, the methodical version of cultural studies that I issue. Actually, he is not accepting that, he is not ready to accept that cultural studies can become a fixed discipline. So he has given up this idea, and my frustration with this approach to cultural studies is intended to be nuanced enough that I can develop a more politically substantial approach to culture in my concluding chapter. One of the central insights of cultural studies is that there is no single or singular version of it. Mark this line. Cultural studies is not single in nature. Okay. In a certain sense, cultural studies resist programmatism. It also resists to become or to be called a fixed program, a fixed, academic program. Okay. A definitive methodology. It resists to become a fixed methodology and a discrete list of critical topics. We cannot make any limitation. Culture is found in every corner of late capitalist society. Culture is such a term, all encompassing term. Culture is to be found in every corner of late capitalist society, undercutting the high culture, popular culture distinction. Thus, cultural studies resists a canonization. Important point for everyone. Please note down, mark it, highlight it. Resists a canonization of cultural products on which it focuses its attention. That means no canon is required, no boundaries required, means no hierarchy is to be made, this is to be taken or this is not to be taken in cultural studies, discussion of cultural studies. Okay, thus cultural studies resists a canonization of cultural products on which it focuses its attention. And as I said earlier, that the range is from film to fashion and whatnot, from science to science fiction. Okay, he has already said in the essay also, thus cultural studies resist a canonization of cultural products on which it focuses its attention. There is no canon, only a heterogeneity of cultural gestures. Mark this point. It is heterogeneous in nature and various aspects of our life are to be covered. Okay, from science to science fiction. Yes, this is the point. This is one of its greatest strength. Okay, he's saying that this is one of the greatest strengths, that the topic ranges from science to science fiction. He has given this example. You may give any other example. See how things are to be covered from every walk of life. This is one of its greatest strengths, helping to reverse the tendency for cultural studies to become a discipline cut off from all the others. So it is a discipline which cannot remain in isolation. Okay, overlapping of many other theories are to be seen, intermingling of many other theories are to be seen here. Given its, hope you understand all these points. May I proceed? There is no canon, only a heterogeneity, because we have to finish it today, all the points. So sometimes I will be leaving some parts if time does not permit us, and later on it will be discussed in some offline classes. There is no canon, only a heterogeneity. This we have completed. Given its interdisciplinary nature as well as its resistance to canon, you can make notes, all the important points of this essay. Make the conceptual points in a diary. Given its interdisciplinary nature as well as its resistance to canon, cultural studies work is found all over the publishing terrain, in books cited throughout this study as well as in cross-disciplinary journals. Like, he has given the names of few journals: Cultural Studies, Cultural Critique, Social Text, Canadian Journal of Political and Social Theory, Current Perspectives in Social Theory, Representations, Discourse, Telos, New German Critique, Critical Studies in Mass Communication, and so on and so forth. If cultural studies is to be treated as a generic approach, again important term, if it is to be treated as a generic term, not a specific, one can talk about at least 11 common features, recognizing that this commonality contrasts with the diversity of ways in which actual cultural studies are carried out. It is also clear that there is no pre-given methodology of cultural studies. Discussion of culture is to be found earlier, but it is a very recent term, so no pre-given methodology is available. I reconstruct these 11 common assumptions from the interpretive practices in which writers actually engage. Indeed, it is somewhat foreign to be decentered, theoretically eclectic tradition of cultural studies to stipulate either underlying assumptions or a political agenda. That is a weakness this book attempts to remedy. I would argue emphatically that cultural studies should be explicit about its implicit theoretical, political, and methodological investments, thus anticipating the charge that cultural studies is but a hybrid version of cultural interpretation with no rigorous justification. Important line for everyone: hybrid version of cultural interpretation with no rigorous justification. That means in one single line, one single sentence, one single definition, we cannot justify what actually cultural study mean. And I'm reminded of one point. Suppose you have not jotted down: the study of literature is everything else. The study, I repeat, the study of literature, so far as cultural studies, cultural critics are saying, the study of literature is everything else. Okay, everything else, and not a set of object, not only a particular class or class of society. Okay, the range is so we cannot define, we cannot limit this term in one single definition. In some measure, then my attempt to codify cultural studies is an attempt to provide it with intellectual legitimacy in the university, acknowledging that academization can fatally deflect cultural studies from political engagements. So no barriers. Cultural studies actually to be taken in this manner. We cannot make any boundaries on which we can treat this term. Okay, academization means we are making it in certain limitations. Okay, institutionalization or academization. So both are not relative terms here. Okay, not useful terms, because it will distract the attention of cultural critics. An expanded notion of culture. Next point he's saying, he has highlighted this point: an expanded notion of culture. Let's see. Proponents and practitioners of cultural studies imply or suggest explicitly that culture is not equivalent to the received high culture. Here, please note down on your margins. Yesterday, we used the term official culture, high culture, culture of aristocratic people or elite people as contrasting idea to the popular culture or the culture of the low class people, the marginalized people, the subaltern people. Okay, so something like this we are going to discuss in this paragraph. Proponents and practitioners means the leading critics of cultural studies. They imply or suggest, they mean to say explicitly that culture is not equivalent to the received high culture of various literary and philosophical canons. Earlier, before this cultural studies came into prominence, what has been done? We have a series of, we have list of writers, and if talking about Matthew Arnold, we can well cite here the example of Matthew Arnold and many other critics who have mentioned, Matthew Arnold has actually talked about touchstone method. So it's very clear and everybody knows it. Many other critics, T.S. Eliot, we have given the reference of T.S. Eliot yesterday. So those critics, those traditional critics have given one prescribed formula. Literature should be like this and this. William Wordsworth has something to say that poetry should be such and such. You know the definition, okay? Then if we take the example of Coleridge, he is talking about fancy and imagination. So they have given very fixed notion. And coming to Matthew Arnold, who is talking about touchstone method, F.R. Lewis, who is talking about the great tradition, and then T.S. Eliot also, who is very much perfectionist, who himself calls that he's a classicist in literature, many others. So here, no philosophical, ideological, or literary canons will be our concern so far as we are dealing with the cultural theory. Okay, rather culture in the broad anthropological sense is any expressive, important point to note, it may be any expressive activity from any walk of life. Okay, just you can recapitulate the pics shown by me in the yesterday lecture. Many pics I have used just to denote, just to make the idea very clear, how culture changes time to time, and consciously or unconsciously we become a part of it, isn't it? So if taken this term cultural studies, it may be any expressive activity from every walk of life, from any walk of life, contributing to social learning. It is not only that by sitting in library, by reading books, by reading only the books written by the great writers of the past, that we can learn the behavioral aspect of the society. Many things we can learn, okay, from other aspects of life also. Social behavior we learn, habits we learn, and many other things like if we look at the actions of our elder members, then also we learn many things. We learn from our juniors also, many things we learn from nature also. Okay, and here I have to say that many things we learn from the social media. With the rapid growth of this television technology and IT revolution, consciously or unconsciously, we are under the perfect grip of all these things. Our tastes are being decided by the advertisements, the food intake. It also matters in all the walks of life. So this way, things are taking place and we are part of it. Okay, contributing to social learning. So these are also the other aspects of social learning. The expansion of the notion of culture by students of cultural studies affects the ways in which popular culture is now conceptualized as a broad ensemble of everyday discursive practices. When I'm reading the text, my speed is very fast. Why? Because you are also reading the text. I hope everybody is having either soft copy or the hard copy, isn't it?
Yes,
Say
ma'am.
yes. All
Yes,
of
ma'am. We
you.
are having the text.
Okay,
Yes,
so no problem. You may also read very fast so that when my reading is complete, you are into discussion. Okay. The expansion of the notion of culture by students of cultural studies affects the ways in which popular culture is now conceptualized. Actually, it is a very debated topic, and I would like to sum up by making a clear-cut difference between high-class literature and popular literature, and in just after finishing the whole topic, because otherwise you will have a little bit confusion. So let us be with the writer, be with the text, and then more interpretation we will carry on. Okay, broad ensemble of everyday. Highlight this point. Broad ensemble of everyday discursive practices that may well fall outside the traditional parameters of official culture. Same point which I used earlier in the earlier lecture. Broad cultural studies is conceptualized. He's saying popular culture or cultural study. Popular culture is described like this. It is a broad In symbol means group or set of everyday discursive practices. We have so many things, so many activities that don't have any correlation, okay, that don't have any meaning, but we are taking all things together here. That may well fall outside the traditional parameters of official culture, narrowly defined, and the ways that science is conceptualized as cultural discourse itself. Now, he himself has given example of the subject science, which is conceptualized as cultural discourse itself. Cultural studies both renders science self-reflexively discursive and post-positivist fashion, and at the same time engages in a kind of meta-canonization that opens cultural analysis to all sorts of interpretive possibilities, all the way from conversation analysis to film and television criticism. So cultural studies is not making any limitation, rather it is opening new ways to look at things. Okay, a good deal of the momentum of culture studies is provided by the post-structural turn in anthropology, with its reflexive attention to the impact of anthropological discourse on the topics and people studied by anthropologists, as well as to the ways in which culture is constituted from the ground up. Within sociology, this tendency, albeit not fertilized by post-structuralism, stems from Harold with his stress. I will be very fast, and sometimes I have highlighted in my in my text, and I will suggest you to mark those points only. The communicative constitution of meaning in everyday life, underline this point. Since the American translation of post-structuralism, sociology has also begun to metabolize post-structural insights into the ways that science itself both frames and reflects sociological data, thus leading to a deeper, more methodical self-reflection that the kind originally recommended by Gardner and Fredericks. It is also clear that much of the impetus behind the expansion of the notion of culture, and thus the enhancement of the relevance of culture, comes from the sweeping transformation in information technology after World War II, especially as these have influenced the huge baby boom generation, both as cultural producers and consumers. This I have already talked about. It was there is a reference of baby boom generation, years 1946 to 1964. Please note down in your margins. Baby boom generation, okay, the child that who took birth in this period, and with a rapid change in the IT sector, what kind of culture took shape? Both as cultural producers and consumers, the television generation received its cultural formation from situation comedy, variety show, and the coverage of political disasters. Mark these words: situation comedies, variety shows, and the coverage of political disasters. The acceptance of television, movies, and rock music as formative influences is in contrast to the decline of the influence of the traditional patriarchal family on children's values and behavior. We all know, point is very clear here, that when this social media was not with us, we were having the joint family system, and the elders, the great grandmothers and father, they used to narrate the fairy tales, the stories, moral stories to children. So the habits, the behavioral aspects of kids were different, and now it is different when the kids are just watching the latest things on the cartoon films, even they are watching on the television. So popular culture matters like never before. Vestiges of traditional high culture like classical music, it is also dying out, because people under 40 do not regularly attend or are being turned into pops program. So much fascination is to be seen for pops and the music. Okay, more things count as culture than ever before, because electronic media have turned the globe into, it is an important point, please note down, highlight this point, turn the globe into global village. Okay, the point is, earlier it was only globe. Now the word global village, when we say, people are really very much closer to each other due to social media. Okay, although the technological, so there is possibility that cultures meet, we meet other cultures, we interact with other people of other cultures, and again I say that consciously or unconsciously we become part of it, we are influenced. Okay, More things count as culture than ever before because electronic media have turned the globe into putative global village. Although the technological determinist and modernist implications of this line of argument must be resisted. Or the televisionization, important point to highlight, televisionization of public life. Our tastes are being decided, what to wear, what to use, okay, by the television advertisements shown there, cannot be ignored as a crucial political factor in late capitalism. The sheer explosion of culture is matched by what Habermas calls it increasing colonization of the live world. So in fact, I should say that it is also a new kind of colonization when television technology and all these things are overruling us. They are guiding us that what we should use and what we should not use. The sheer explosion of culture is matched by what Habermas calls its increasing colonization of the live world as well as psyche of global citizens. Elite culture is being undermined not least by the mechanical reproduction that Walter Benjamin hoped could function to promote political education and hence liberation. I believe that Benjamin was wrong to conflate the mechanical reproduction of culture in general with the liberating potential of particular types of culture, whether the Communist Manifesto or the painting Guernica. Nevertheless, we cannot somehow bypass the extensive terrain of electrified popular culture in theorizing about and intervening to change the present social world. So here I have to say that cultural artifacts have also become material object. We are taking the cultural artifacts, we are only considering its material value. The legitimacy of popular culture. This is the next heading we are going to read. I will be leaving, I will be fast, and but I will be focusing on the important points. Okay. As I just noted, post-structural reflexivity is responsible for a good deal of the broadening of cultural analysis to include topics and approaches hitherto ignored by more traditional aesthetic theorists. Another factor in the broadening of cultural analysis is the growing legitimacy of popular culture. Those who are in favor of popular culture, they say that yes, it is the need of the hour. It is very much required. We must practice. We must be familiar with what is going on in the present time. So legitimacy of popular culture itself as a venue of critical activity and intervention. Of course, this is a chicken and egg phenomenon. The growing legitimacy of popular culture as a thematic topic is redoubled by the influences of cultural analysis and analysts willing to entertain a broad critical agenda. The rise of journalistic television criticism is only one relevant example here. Pauline Kael's film criticism is the New Yorker has singularly expanded the cultural canon and elevated the status of the film critic herself. So intervention of television technology is to be seen. Filmmakers, the script writers, they have gained much more prominence these days. Because new versions of cinema version and television version, it is much more in demand. Okay, the decanonization of bourgeois high culture might well be viewed as a kind of deconstruction, the inevitable result of a certain tendency for high culture leaving some parts. Please come to this line. It might well be argued that earlier romantic concepts of high culture, no doubt, market romantic, either the romantics were talking about sublimity, higher things, higher noble values, were bound to erode under siege by the tendencies of what Walter Benjamin called mechanical reproduction in the realm of culture. And these tendencies had to do with the rise of the culture industry. Important concept as Horkheimer and Adorno, according to them, the rise of popular culture both reflects and reproduces the rise of capitalism. The popularization, this is what we are going to say that all the cultural products, cultural artifacts are to be judged only from the material point of view. The popularization of culture sedates large groups of people against their own alienation, at the same time help check the tendencies of the rate of profit to fall by priming cultural production and consumption. The television, video and movie businesses are massive. Important line, you can mark it. The television, video, and movie businesses are massive in their own right. So script writers, the film producers, cinema producers, they are much more in demand. Unlike some of the members of the original Frankfurt School like Horkheimer and Adorno, most proponents of cultural studies refuse to devalue the realm of popular culture as inherently inferior by comparison to earlier forms of high culture, notably modernism. They insist that popular culture is a legitimate subject of academic inquiry because culture matters. So they are saying that this topic must be discussed in the academic corridors also. It is because culture matters. It is a very important aspect of our daily life. It is serious business and thus should be taken seriously. Important point. There is a certain populism in this insistence, a refusal to vouchsafe Mandarin high culture. They are actually opposed to the Mandarin high culture ideology. Now I'm moving further, and please come to this paragraph, page number 5. I have taken coming to this line. My main argument in this book is that cultural studies today splits into a conformist, comfortable position, notable for its methodological approach to cultural reading, and a more critical version that can be traced directly to the inspiration of the Frankfurt School, albeit fertilized with insights from less Mandarin perspectives on culture, especially that of the Birmingham School. With the onset of this school setup of by the Birmingham critics Stuart Hall and Richard Hoggart, this theory gained much more prominence. A conformist cultural studies remains atheoretical and apolitical. That means it does not have so much to do with the politics. The more critical version recognizes that cultural reception, including cultural studies itself, must become a form of de-hierarchized cultural production in a new society. I argue for a cultural studies that locates its analytical activity in an everyday life. Note down this point, okay? And then moving further, same page, page number 5. Please look at this line, cultural studies. Got it? Cultural studies is the technical term people often use in order to legitimize, got it? Legitimize their fascination with mass culture. Okay? It gives them a certain academic authority and seems to avoid the more radical connotation of terms like the critique of ideology, which is what Marxists view as the proper project of cultural analysis and intervention. Then we can move further. Page number 6, you can see these lines. Just before the heading culture is us, cultural studies is extremely seductive for those of us who grew up with television and mass movies and recognize their power of distortion. Why he has said that cultural studies is extremely seductive? Because it catches the attention. It is very tempting field. People are moving in this direction to take up new subjects, new avenues from the other walks of life, something that remains silent for those of us who grew up, because no boundaries are there and it opened new areas. Anything we can take up for discussion, anything can become a discourse, anything can become a text. So cultural studies is tempting for those who grew up with television. If time ends, then we have to rejoin. So please rejoin the class once again for the completion. I think it is less than 1 minute. It is showing. Okay. Cultural studies is extremely seductive for those of us who grew up with television and mass movies and recognize their powers of distortion, deception, and suggestion. To some extent, we succumb to those temptations precisely because culture matters today more than ever. Note down this point, and we will have discussion either online or offline mode. But note down this point, that why culture matters today so much. We will have long discussion on this subject. Why culture, important point, why culture matters today more than ever, both deepening servitude, and that discussion will not have anything to do with the text. We will have a very, innovative ideas I want from you. So cultural studies, he's saying, he's concluding.
So cultural, I know. This is what I'm already thinking. Oh, mic is on.
Hello. Am I audible?
Yes,
Hello.
ma'am, you are audible.
Hello, yes,
Yes,
ma'am.
ma'am.
You're audible.
Okay,
Yes.
I'm continuing. I'm moving further. Culture is us. Now, let's discuss this topic. Culture is us. As I noted, we baby boomers are immensely attracted to cultural studies. Okay, if you want, I can summarize the whole essay and you can just note down the important points because it is very lengthy and time does not permit that much. So, leaving it unfinished and means giving a good closure to the text and making all the things clear to you. If you want, then I can means practice, I can adopt another method, not reading so much from the text but making the gist clear to you. Okay, what is your viewpoint, may I know? It is only six papers, page 6 we are discussing and we have. Yes,
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 ma'am. You can
Safiya.
summarize. Yes, ma'am.
Yes, ma'am,
Summarizing,
Yes, ma'am. You can
just
summarizing,
summarize.
summarize it.
summarizing. Okay, okay, okay. So
Yes, ma'am. We can
you
note down the important points
you
and
can
then.
note down. Yes, yes, fine. Because if I turn the pages and I'm concentrating on any line I have in my mind, you will not be able to find it so early. Okay, so just be
Yes,
with me
ma'am.
and note down the important points. Okay, so that we can give a good closure. Huh? And in the end, please remind me that 5 minutes are
Yes,
remaining
ma'am.
so
Sure.
that we may have some interactive session also. Okay, lastly, so culture is us. Am I audible? All the things are
Sure.
clear. Culture is us. This topic. Culture is us. This topic I am taking, and only this line I am taking. We are popular culture. We identify ourselves not with the generational events that are enormously signifying for us. He's saying culture is us. Who is making culture? In culture, suppose we take up the word, then all of us are part of it. Nobody will left behind. Nobody will be out of it. Okay, so in the next paragraph he said that in this sense cultural studies brings the world home much as it is brought home through its visual. How? Because now with the help of technology, all the things, it is uh, there is a rapid transmission of culture and we are able to perceive what is happening all around us getting affected. And for this, the writer himself has used the word global village, isn't it? Global village, because people are really very much closer. They are intermingled with each other. So global village, like all villages, is a familiar place. What kind of familiar place? Because A familiar place is one where people are living and people are getting influenced also, isn't it? So the global village, like all villages, is a familiar place with a well-known backdrop of habits, norms, facades, and peoples. This all is part of our daily aspects of life. Okay, next, Hoggar's book, The Uses of Literacy and the Subsequent Formation of the Birmingham Center. We may see that this theory, cultural studies, gained prominence during this period. There is a reference of it. Then influence of technology or the electronic media, how it is influencing our life. Next topic, he has taken culture as practice. He has taken the term culture as practice. This is the outer side of the generational equation. Cultural, he said, watchers are also, please mark, just note down this point, watchers are also potential cultural creators. Those who watch the items, maybe be it news items, be it entertainment programs we are watching, they are also cultural creators, because very next moment, when getting influence, after getting influence from any advertisement, they will buy that kind of product, and they will make use of it, and gradually it will pass on to others. Okay, so they themselves become the cultural creators, and now later on it will become the fashion. One single individual will start practicing or making use of any single product, and then gradually it is a very, with the help of with the help of technology, crisscrossing, and this global village, the term we are again using, there is a possibility that things are not limited to one end. Okay, it is moving to from one to another. Okay. You can see that how you using the WhatsApp or using the Instagram or using Facebook, how things are, our pics, our images, it is so much scattered when we give a look to close look to these social media. For example, people who organized and engaged in the various actions surrounding the Chicago Democratic Convention in the year 1968 understood clearly how the whole world is watching. Would be important line, how the whole world is watching, would be watching on television, and in the print media. Actually, the role of print media was not that massive. Electronic media has much more attracted, and we are under the grip of it, everybody. So watches, page number 8, I'm referring page number 8, and I have highlighted watchers watching themselves watch. Please note down this phrase, watchers watching themselves watch. So how things are passing, moving on from the watchers, TV watchers, program watchers, whatever we do watch. Watchers watching what they are seeing, and they are looking at themselves. They are also looking at themselves that they are watching, also leads to transformative, as in the earlier page he has referred to this idea that whole world is watching, and the watchers become the cultural creators. Note down this point, watchers become the cultural creators later on. Then I'm giving new idea here. Page number 8, I'm referring. One of the strongest insights of cultural studies is that culture is transacted between consumers and producers. It is not simply laid on people from above, although typically in capitalism, culture is differentially controlled and disseminated by elites. But this was the case in the earlier times. The notion that culture is practice has strong implication for what cultural analysts study. A theme I touched on above in my discussion is of the expansion of culture. Cultural studies has helped detextualize culture. Note down this point. Cultural studies has detextualized culture, opening cultural analysis to approaches of cultural constitution, that may not result in traditional literary outcomes, notably the so-called great books. Again, the classics, which we have referred, classics, great books. So, if we take this term cultural studies, the word culture has been detextualized here. Anything like he is saying, the city can be a discourse. The country and the city, one book I mentioned, written by whom? Yes, anybody? The culture and the city, yes, the country and the city, not culture. The country and the city. It's a book written by whom?
Ma'am, Raymond Williams.
Who is saying?
Ma'am, it is I, Amreen.
Amreen has given the answer, and the answer is correct. Correct. So
Oh, it is correct.
yes, it is correct. Raymond Williams, Keywords, Communications. These are his important books. Raymond Williams, you said the city is a discourse.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay. The city is a discourse, but in this essay of Bennegar, he has used this term. The city can also become a discourse. It is good that you also sometimes talk and you also participate in the discussion. The whole notion of textuality has been transvalued by cultural studies, or better, textuality has broadened under the influences of the entertainment and news industries. Page number 9, and note down the point, textuality has broadened under the influence of the entertainment. Textuality has broadened the area, what is to be taken as text, what is to be considered as text. That area has been broadened because of the influence of television technology, the mass media available to us. Okay, got it? Page number 9 I have referred, and the line I have marked, I have highlighted, I told you, and the interpretation also. Then page number 9, culture is conflict. Okay, I am telling you step by step that you are able to see also culture is conflict. Cultural studies proponents of all sorts, stemming from Hogarth's original analysis of working class discourse. This word is also to be highlighted, working class discourse. There is an important book, important for your examination. Okay, mark it. Working class discourse. The title is something else. Raymond Williams, the working class people, something like this. Raymond Williams, Culture and Society Perspective, Neo-Marxist Theories of Culture and Feminist Approaches to Culture, contend that culture is not an undifferentiated system that serves to integrate society, but instead it is a region of serious contest and conflict over meaning. Note down the point, conflict over meaning. Conflict, culture is conflict, bracketed over meaning, but rather about many, often cross-cutting cultures, cultures of whom? Cultures of class, culture of race, gender, nation. He has given a list amongst others. Indeed, cultural politics is considered as important auxiliary of traditional class politics. Moving further, I will be discussing this line. Yes, hegemony for Gramsci and later Western Marxists. Whose concept? Hegemony. Who is not a noted critic?
Antonio Gramsci.
Fine. Hegemony for Gramsci and later Western Marxists refers to the ways in which domination is not only produced from outside everyday life. Mark this line or just note down. Domination is not only produced from outside everyday life through the huge structures of capital, but also from within everyday life by people more or less resigned to their fates as eternal subordinates, even cheerful about the good society. Okay, note down this point. Cultural studies emphasizes, I'm moving further, cultural studies emphasizes that culture is conflict over meaning. This line is to be debated. It is to be interpreted in this way that it is very difficult to define cultural studies. So we are nowhere. We are reaching nowhere. No conclusion is possible. It is somewhat related to I'm reminded here of deconstructionists who also say that reaching to any point of view is a meaningless activity. It is of no value because every reading is a new kind of writing to preface the next, as Derrida is talking about. So culture is conflict over meaning, no fixities, no fixed meaning we can derive over how to assign value to human existence. Actually, there is overlapping of many other ideas. Okay, note down page number 10 I have referred, and the line cultural studies emphasizes that culture is conflict over meaning. Conflict over meaning means undecided. It is we are unable to decide. We are unable to decipher a single meaning, single definition over how to, because culture varies, culture transforms, culture changes every time over how to assign value to human existence, expression, experience, etc., etc. Moving further, coming to this point, they add that these conflicts are powerful initiators. These conflicts are powerful initiators as well as symptoms of social change. Suppose you just imagine any situation that a conflict has been arising. Okay, take that situation. Conflicts are always powerful initiators to social change. Some change, there will be some social learning out of it. Okay, so conflicts are powerful initiators. Page number 10, you can later on read out the whole sentence. Conflicts are powerful initiators as well as symptoms of social change. It is very much required not to be dispelled or suppressed. Conflicts should not be suppressed. Further, cultural studies proponents see cultural conflict in surprising places. Okay. Then page number 10, mark these words heterogeneity, multiplicity, and it is irreducible to official narratives about it, because it is not an official culture, it is not any fixed set of people, any limited class we are talking about, unlimited, we can have unlimited discussion on it, and it is liked by everyone, and it is the culture being practiced, being followed by everyone. So it is heterogeneous in nature, and multiplicity is irreducible to official narratives about it. Those fond of talking about singular values and meanings overlook or ignore oppositional cultures that spring up in surprising places and take heterodox forms. Feminist cultural studies has been especially helpful in pointing out the hegemonizing implications of official cultural approaches that equate male culture with the totality of culture. Now, feminist cultural approach, cultural studies. Sometimes we have seen, if we talk about feminism, we all know the feminist perspective, feminist ideology, that it is the voice of the female who remains suppressed. Now they are in the forefront. So in culture, if we talk about culture of the women's who remain marginalized or suppressed. Now two things are combining here. Feminist cultural perspective, that means women, culture of those women who remain suppressed. It will be the most important argument to be taken. As I discussed in chapter 7, one of the most important political contributions of feminism to cultural studies lies in its thematization of cultural practices and traditions suppressed by dominant male culture, including the cultures of gay people. It remains suppressed by the dominant male culture. In this sense, cultural studies challenges accounts of mainstream culture. It raises its voice against the domination of mainstream culture. Mainstream culture, mainstream ideology has ignored the cultural alternatives. Now those alternatives are in the forefront. Now they are not in the background, they are in the forefront. Okay. Next, page number 11, making space, the decentering and decanonizing of culture. Okay, and please mark this line, the decentering of culture. See how earlier I have discussed feminist perspective in cultural studies, how feminism has also intervened. And here, decentering of culture is a political act that contributes significantly to the decentering of power and wealth. Decentering means culture which is being dominant culture. One thing is dominant culture, culture being practiced by the aristocratic or elite or high class people. And nowadays, this popular culture, which is much more in demand of people. So decentering of culture is a political agenda. It is a political act that contributes significantly to the decentering of power and wealth. And definitely the power politics will be involved. It is a fundamental challenge to the dominant order. You can relate it to Marxism also. Moving further, page number 12, and I'm taking this idea, some few words I will be discussing here. There is a difference of American deconstruction, depoliticized methodological approach to cultural studies, intermingling of various other disciplines. This is to be seen here. Proponents, page number 12, proponents of cultural studies attempt to challenge both traditional curricula and modes of scholarly evaluation in order to make space for alternative voices. So note down this point, that it is making an open space for alternative cultural practices, alternative ideologies, or alternative cultural practices. Making space, this is the key word of this paragraph. Making space, making open space. And earlier, decentering of culture. This was the main key word, key phrase of that paragraph. Moving further from 17 to not 17, 12 to 13, I have taken. Cultural studies could become the basis of a new interdisciplinary critical theory that raises it to a higher, more politically self-conscious level. Okay, and then page number 13 discusses, here Benneker discusses production, distribution, consumption. Okay, just as English department curricula have begun to change in light of the decanonization of literature and detextualization of culture generally, so the social sciences have begun to have an impact on an important line. Please mark it, page number 13, the opening lines. English department curricula have begun to change their syllabus, their academic syllabus in light of the decanonization of literature. Most of the things which were not being read by the students earlier, now they are prescribing those topics in the courses. So the social sciences have begun to have an impact on an emerging cultural studies. Emerging, this is the key word of this theory. It is emerging theory. All the time it is growing, it is moving, advancing. This impact has mainly involved the analysis of interlocking, interdependent cultural institution comprising the production, distribution, and consumption of cultural commodities. Cultural studies, in its emphasis on culture as practice, helps us situate the creation of cultural artifacts in complex social and economic spaces within which creative activity is conditioned, even determined. Okay, here little discussion is required. Important topic, page number 13, please have a look at this topic. Okay, page number 13, production, distribution, and consumption of cultural artifact. This is the topic. Key concept given here. Cultural studies and its emphasis on culture as practice help us situate the creation of cultural artifacts in complex social and economic spaces. We can understand it like this. Suppose a great classic piece of literature, somebody's making a cinema version of it, and they are in the process of movie making. Okay, this movie making process is being done. So one thing we will notice, that it's not an individual work. When we read any book, we enjoy it individually, sitting in some solitary place, we enjoy. Okay, it's an individual activity. But so far as this cultural activity, cultural discourse is concerned, when things are not limited to one end, okay, transmission is taking place, okay, and many people are involved in this movie making process. Many people are involved, many characters are involved, director is giving direction to the characters. First the selection process will be done, script writing will be done, then you know we can understand it like this. Do you think that watching any cinema, we give any time, we devote any time to understand how the characters they suffered how much, and then this thing is taking place and we all are enjoying, whether they were paid fully or whole night they were sleepless, isn't it? So I'm relating it with the lines given here: cultural artifacts, cultural production in its emphasis on culture as practice help us situate the creation of cultural artifacts in complex. He's not saying that it is a simple process. It is a complex social and economic condition in which cultural production took place, took shape, within which creative activity is conditioned, even determined. Okay, important point to note. Page number 13. Then I'm moving further to the next important idea. Academic writing is a peculiar language game. Note down this point. Academic writing is a peculiar language game. When we do write something, we say that language can just give meaning to whatever you write, what kind of language we use. So academic writing is a peculiar language game. Then moving further, culture industry is a big business. How may I know the time? Somebody can just give me what? So please remind me.
I think,
Yes.
ma'am, 13 minutes are left.
Okay, fine. Academic writing is social practice. Academic writing, have you noted down these points? Academic writing as social practice. Academic writing is a peculiar language game. Culture industry is a big business. Note down this point. Culture industry is a big business. Culture has become a full industry. Cultural studies broadens interpretive focus to include extra textual aspects. Important point. You may note down extra textual aspects of a work's context. It is not only text that matters, it is many non-literary aspects or extra textual aspects that matters in any cultural production. Okay, moving further to this page number 14, I'm referring. Culture is not a realm apart, a separate variable. Please note down this idea. Culture is not a realm apart. It is not an isolated phenomenon, a separate variable. Rather, we can see a fusion. We can see that many other disciplines are crisscrossing and intermingling, and many variants are to be seen. Then moving further, cultural studies proponents. I think you are able to jot down the important ideas. It will help you to make
Yes,
your own
ma'am.
thesis. Okay. Popular culture heading, which Ben Egger has used here, that is popular culture and populism. Okay, popular culture and populism. Populism is a kind of political approach that strives to appeal to ordinary people. These proponents are not embarrassed by their new agenda of cultural critical topics, all the way from television soap operas to mass market movies. They means they are having this, they have this feel of pride that they are into this field. They are not feeling ashamed that they are practicing, they have taken these topics. Okay, decanonization can be phrased positively, where cultural studies not only addresses popular culture for its debasement and manipulated character, but treats popular culture as wellspring of emancipatory impulses. Important word, please note down. We can see popular culture as a wellspring of emancipatory impulses. Impulse is such a thing whatever we do, whatever activity we are involved, be it writing, be it some presentation, or be it making some, or we are involved in any activity, there is some impulse. Whatever we are doing, there is some impulse, some insights working in you, something that guides you, your inner self guides you. Okay, so behind this discussion of cultural studies, I should say, a kind of emancipatory this subject talks about, it wants to make itself free from any limitation. So it's an emancipatory project. You can write like this: it's a kind of emancipatory project. It wants to free itself from any boundaries. There is a powerful populism about cultural studies that resist elitism in all fashions, sometimes against its own self-interest. Again, moving further to next page, page number 15, I am referring postmodernism is the cultural application of certain post-structural insights. Populism and postmodernism both underwrite powerful versions of cultural studies. They devalue cultural studies, these two schools. Okay, then moving further, I'm coming to this heading, disciplining, page number 17, disciplining. Cultural studies is inherently indisciplinary. It has to be interdisciplinary, sorry. Cultural studies is inherently interdisciplinary. It has to be interdisciplinary because traditional disciplines do not got it. Page number 17. Mark this first paragraph, cultural studies up to political economy. Sometimes maybe your final exams, it can be in the not objective pattern. It's only my assumption. It can be full length writing work, okay, or the subjective kind of exam. So you have to make your own thesis, you have to make your own version after reading all these essays. Cultural studies, that's why I'm referring, I'm pointing out to each and every point. Okay, cultural studies is inherently interdisciplinary. It has to be interdisciplinary because traditional disciplines do not address phenomena of popular culture in a way that blends critical theory, literary theory, discourse analysis, women's studies, sociology, and political economy. Lines are quite clear that in traditional earlier kind of theories, we were discussing, if we take up Marxism, independent ideology, feminism, independent ideology, but here it is not possible. Okay, the traditional academic disciplines are simply too confining for people to pursue the diverse issues addressed by cultural studies scholars, all the way from film theory to the political economy of the book publishing. Many things are involved in this whole process. Moving further, I think moving further, page number 18, I'm referring cultural studies not as a new meta discipline, but as a subfield within their own disciplines that can be pursued. Got it? Page number 18. Yet there are those, this line in the first paragraph, yet there are those who view cultural studies not as a new meta discipline, but as a subfield within their own disciplines that can be pursued within the fundamental substantive and methodological assumptions of the discipline in question. Up to here. In general, most cultural studies proponents oppose the disciplinary society in Foucault's sense. Moving further, should academic, see the lines, second last, should academic disciplines, departments be abolished or recombined? Earlier, what is to be seen? Academic, only the great writers, the canonized texts were prescribed in the departments, English departments. So what is to be done? Should academic disciplines, departments be abolished completely? That means, should we give up all these things, reading the high class literature or the great writers of the past, or we have to recombine? Means a kind of reconciliation is to be done. Literary studies plus this cultural studies taken together. Should marginal, he is proposing some questions here. Next question, should marginal departments and programs like women's studies, black studies and American studies be the hosts of cultural studies? That means they will be hosting, they will play the key roles in the departments. These subjects will play the key roles. They will gain the prominence. Does the recombination of disciplines and scholars only shuffle the deck but not change the institutional game? Could cultural studies departments make much difference within the bureaucratic universities? What would be unifying theories and methodologies behind cultural studies? My answer, let's read out the lines of Vinegar. My answer to these questions are necessarily personal. I want to defer them until my last chapter. Largely for that you have to finish the whole book. Largely because I do not believe that the radical critique of discipline can productively ignore the various contribution of cultural studies approaches, however fragmented they may be. I am skeptical about whether creating cultural studies programs will make much difference. Indeed, I will argue for a version of cultural studies that extends far beyond the academy in order to become a mode of everyday life itself. This does not mean that we people from the academics can dispense with the practical as well as theoretical and methodological implications of our disciplinary critiques. After all, the university plays a significant role in the reproduction of cultural hegemony as well as in the scientific technical accumulation of power and wealth. Both the reformist and radical version of disciplinary critique have been somewhat misfocused. The reformist version, where it implants cultural studies as a subfield within disciplines, and the radical version where it entrenches cultural studies as a bona fide discipline in itself. The most politically effective cultural studies work would deconstruct disciplines from within, questioning their very rights to exist apart from other disciplines. This borrowing from within could take a cultural studies perspective, especially in the arts, humanities, and human sciences, challenging a variety of dominant but differential assumptions all the way from textual objectivity to the positivist philosophy of science. Again, this sort of agenda setting will have to await the last chapter. A note of caution here, cultural studies refuses to become a rigid program. Its diversity, its flexibility are its epistemological hallmarks. Yes, it is known, it is very much famous, it is prominent because of only these two qualities, that it is diverse in nature and it is flexible. It many things can be incorporated in it. Thus, there is no single or static version of cultural studies applicable across or from within each and every discipline. But that is precisely the power of the movement that has coalesced around the term cultural studies as well as one of its shortcomings. Almost finished, cultural studies and the Archimedean problem. Most version of cultural studies that diverge from the Frankfurt legacy oppose high culture Mandarism and elitism. You may just go through this text once again, keeping in mind all the important points I have highlighted or you have also marked, okay? And you can also note down the important questions, how things are overlapping. We can see many times that many theories, and this is the nature of cultural studies, that it is not to be discussed in isolation. Rather, it has to be discussed in all together. Okay, so let's, I think remaining time very little. So one question I will try to set before you. What will be your view that should the literary studies, or even as researcher, how you are going to take up things? Literary studies on one hand and cultural studies, which has opened a wide range before you to select topics or to do researches, how you are going to reconcile with this thing? Is it possible that all the great writers, they also remain in touch with us. We give due respect, or we do means we write in a proper manner. We don't undervalue them, isn't it? And simultaneously we are making new researches in which we are